Tattered jeans, t-shirts, and baseball caps make a statement. So do designer evening gowns. From that first fig leaf to the outfits in our closets today, people use clothing as expressions of their individuality and sometimes to voice ideas for social and political change. The 17 artists featured in the Vested Interest exhibition create clothing and accessories that make bold statements. Statements that highlight war and conflict or mass consumption, and some that address concerns about the garment industry and homeland security. Through works of art, the artists express their civil liberties. Stephanie Liner of New York grew up in North Carolina, an area once recognized for their textiles. Today, she creates works of art that are influenced by the industry of that region. Her sculptures combine elements of furniture and dress.
I use particular furniture styles. I do research. I'm still researching. When I was younger, I would go antiquing with my family, where you search out certain types of furniture. Whether they're antiques or not wasn't necessarily the goal. It was more about having a certain type of furniture in your home that when I look around at the people around us and the things that I've noticed, it's a pretty traditional or middle-class Southern families have very similar patterns that they use, and I'm using, of course, exaggerated patterns, exaggerated colors, but that I take note of those things. And I began to think about, well, why do we want that? Why are we interested in this? Because I think oftentimes people don't think about the historical references. Those are past things that came over, over from abroad, and that they were colonialized here, and then we began to associate those with a certain class or status, even if they aren't expensive. They're just a status symbol. Well, if I could have it, I would always have a live model available for my work. I plan these or work around the idea of this actual person wearing these, and that that's really important to me. And so the mannequins are really something that's a placeholder for the person. So I don't want the mannequins to have any type of personality, because I want the person and the hair and the makeup and for me to be able to control that personality. So the human aspect of this is very important, and I really wouldn't, if I could have it, I wouldn't want to show these without that, but that's not possible. I deal with a lot of topics like sexuality, roles in sexuality, roles in gender, the way that we present ourselves and the roles that we're expected to play, the expectations that come from the outside, from our culture at large across the United States, but also in our local regions, how those are expressed to you and how that you're then able to fulfill those roles. I think that there's a conversation that happens when you look at the work that's about personal interaction, personal and public baggage, the things that we carry around with us, whether that's positive or negative, it doesn't matter. It's that it's there, and that we all have that, whether we're from wherever we're from. It's a part of us as human beings.
Frau Fiber describes herself as artist, activist, and textile worker. She organizes and participates with groups of people in public spaces in order to draw attention to ideas of labor, garment production, and other social issues.
The installations are modeled after trying to recreate the performance that happened. So what's actually on exhibition here at the Kohler Center is what I call trace material artifacts from a performance that happened last spring. And it was a 14-hour durational sewing performance undertaken by 8 people. And so the things that are in the gallery are the garments that were produced, the garments that are in process, patterns, photographic documentation, and then there are some furniture pieces that are actually not from that performance, but used to kind of create the feeling of what it was like in the space. But I think it's very important that especially the garments are the documentation of the time and the duration of the performance. So understanding that, I think we completed 4 or 5 garments. None of them have any finishings, like hand finishings. It was just the machine work, but that took 8 people over 14 hours just to make those 4 garments. None of them are skilled laborers either. They're all volunteers and new sewers, people that have just started to pick up the process and were interested in volunteering and participating in the performance. And they're part of what's called the Synchronized Sewing Squad. And the Synchronized Sewing Squad performs this garment labor in public space. I feel that sewing is a revolutionary act. It's actually kind of a form of anarchy because you're going against the system that we're being fed every day through the media. And it is an empowering thing. Like, there was a woman that came to the Sewing Rebellion at Mess Hall, and she was probably in her mid-50s. And she came in one day and she like stood in the middle of the room and she was just watching us and looking at all this like hub of activity of people sewing. And she says, I've wanted to learn how to do this my whole life. And she really had no skills. Like, she had never really done anything with her hands before. So the first thing we did was alter a dress that she had. And she had this uniform too of kind of like sack dresses, and she must have had a closet full of them because every week she would come back with another one that needed a hem. And then she like progressed from altering her dresses to having the desire to make her own dress from scratch. And so after about like 9 months of this, she was so proud of the fact that she could like sew her own clothes and do her own thing. And for her, it was this very like liberating experience through something that's very hands-on. There's a great sense of community when you bring people together. The act of making something has become so invisible in our culture. We don't see how things are made. We don't understand how garments or bags or the things that we use every day, kind of where they come from. And so I feel like it's important to bring that action, that labor out into public space so that people see it and hopefully make connections to where their clothes come from. And then maybe think about the people that make their clothes when they read the label that says Made in China, and maybe will be at some point in the future willing to spend a little bit more for a shirt so those people can make a living wage versus, a non-living wage, which is currently what they live under.
The Cuban-born artist team of Alain Guerra and Neraldo de la Paz use found clothing in their installations to emphasize reuse. Their focus on a handmade process highlights their concerns about waste and consumption in our society.
When we do our large-scale installations, mostly the landscape work, we think of impressionist paintings because placing a garment in a scenario is kind of like a brushstroke. When you look at a form, shape, line, all the basic things that you would be looking at in a drawing or in a painting are still pretty much something we have to look at it sculpturally. It's just a three-dimensional situation as opposed to a flat piece.
The found object to us has a life of its own. It has its own history, and it embodies an energy that we can bring into our work, and specifically the clothes, the fact that it's been worn, and sometimes it even has the smell of the previous owner, or it just has the energy that it exudes, and people when they look at the work, they can actually relate to a particular garment and have their own connection with the garment because it's something that's familiar to them, and maybe it's something that they wore, or something that reminds them of an experience in their own life, and you have that connection with the audience because everybody can relate to clothes. We all wear it. And,
it also, I think the found object also has a kind of relevance to our contemporary time. It's kind of like archaeological. You see objects that reflect what was going on at the time, and when you see a garment from the 80s, I mean, we know it's from the 80s. If you see something that is specifically from the 20s, everything has kind of its period and its genre, and it's really interesting to play with that information as well, because you take something from the past and you're bringing it into the present and creating something that is speaking perhaps about today or maybe about the future. The hands in this particular piece, you have red figure going to orange, and as their hands are joined, you'll see a color fade that is, the red starts turning into orange, and then it goes into the orange, and then from the orange figure it starts going into the yellow. And that, I think, shows solidarity, union. It also speaks of hierarchy and the protection of the ring outside the center is obvious protecting the black and the white figures who are also in harmony. So it also speaks of a lot of things that aren't necessarily community and where the powers that be are untouchable. And although they pretend to be a community, they're keeping you out from that center, which I think it works on both levels. I mean, it's a very uplifting piece and very pretty, but I think it has a very dark side as well.
It also touches on our society and how it can, the amount of goods we consume and how easily things are discarded because of the materials that we use.
What issues do you feel strongly about? Where do you long to see change happen in the world around you? We hope that as you walk through the exhibition space, you too will be inspired to share your cause in creative new ways.